I haven't really played guitar in a long time, and I was never really good at it in the first place, but I think I'm gonna try playing you guys a little something, you know, something kind of special, you know, from me to you. Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, I'm Trevor and I am eternally uncool. I make videos about music, music culture, and anything that interests me. But mostly music right now. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, hit the subscribe button and keep watching this video. I've made 2 videos about pop punk albums that you need to listen to. That's 3 albums per video. That's 6 pop punk albums. And to be quite honest with you guys, I'm getting kind of tired of pop punk. I think I need something with a little bit more emotional depth. Emotional depth. Emotional? Emo?
Oh, yes, please.
Emo is very divisive and confusing. No one is really sure what counts as emo. In the late 80s and early 90s, it was an offshoot of hardcore, but with more emotional and personal lyrics than that of the more aggressive and political ones of hardcore. As the 90s wore on, emo developed more elements from indie rock and pop punk and power pop. The themes were still personal and emotional, reading almost like diary entries. And of course, in the mid-2000s, emo blew up and it was all about skinny jeans and haircuts, and it was the bane of every band's existence. Now, I could spend all day talking about emo and what emo really is, but we don't have that kind of time. And no one watched my video about the history of emo, so... No, instead, I'd rather talk about 3 emo albums that you need to listen to. Just like in my pop punk videos, these albums are all personal favorites of mine. I think that pretty much goes without saying at this point. I usually have rules for videos like this, but fuck it, I'm tired. Your boy's going through it. I haven't even painted my nails. There's no rules. The only thing I should mention is that just like my first pop punk video, these 3 emo albums have all been taken from my college years, which means they all come from the emo revival. Okay, so without any further ado, let's get into the video. Here are 3 emo albums you should listen to. Modern Baseball is probably the biggest band to come out of the 2010s emo revival. They have such a huge and devoted following that I always compare them to My Chemical Romance in that way. Like if Modern Baseball just out of the blue just said, "Hey guys, we're back," everybody would lose their shit. And for good reason. They burst onto the scene and released 3 S-tier albums. But I think my favorite has to be their 3rd and final album, Holy Ghost. I was already a pretty big Modern Baseball fan by the time this album came out. They were one of the first emo revival bands that I discovered. When I created this YouTube account, one of the first channels that I followed was Run for Cover Records, and I would just watch Modern Baseball music videos, interviews. They were a band that was close to my age and close to my scene. They're from Philly, I'm from Newark. It was my first exposure to DIY ethics, a DIY scene, and just a local scene. My introduction to their music was through their sophomore album, You're Gonna Miss It All. Specifically through the song and video for Your Graduation. I have such fond memories of listening to this album to and from classes when I went to the local community college and I did nothing but skip classes and read in the courtyard. I liked Brendan and Jake's dual vocals, and the rest of the band was just a perfect unit. The album was this great mix of emo, pop punk, and a little bit of folk punk. It definitely informed a lot of my taste as I entered my 20s. In the lead up to the release of Holy Ghost, Run for Cover released a mini documentary about the band. It talked about their history, their beginnings as a band, the recording of the album. It's a great documentary and it's less than 20 minutes long, so you should definitely check it out, but after this video. I tell you this because the documentary had just as big an impact on me as the album did. I would watch it all the time, especially when I was sad and drunk. This documentary did help me appreciate the album that much more, just knowing what they went through and what went into it. Holy Ghost feels like the most mature album out of the trilogy that Modern Baseball would release within their lifespan as a band. Their first album, Sports, is very earnest in that way that young men are earnest. It's sincere to a fault. You're Gonna Miss It All is the band honing their skills and doing what they're already good at. They turned everything up to 11 and proved that they were a band to look out for. Holy Ghost is an album by a band who knows who they are, knows what they're good at. The album is intensely personal. Prior to the album, co-lead vocalist Brendan Lukens had been going through a bout of serious depression and substance abuse, and it got to the point where he attempted to unalive himself before his bandmates intervened and could get him the help that he needed. And Jake Ewald had just suffered a heavy loss, his grandfather, a man who he admired and revered. The opening lines of the first song on the album are just so haunting and perfectly reflect these feelings.
He's been haunting my dreams at night.
And then that opening track leads into the first single, The Wedding Singer, which is just as punchy and just as catchy as Your Graduation, but still with just such intense meaning and purpose. It's not just a song that's supposed to be catchy. There's something to it.
Said goodbye from the front porch. I always wonder if you're smiling at us or if you're looking away.
This line is about how when Jake got the news that his grandfather was going to pass, he went out onto the front porch to say his goodbyes. He's wondering if his grandfather would be proud of him, a feeling that I personally can relate to as someone who lost their grandfather at a young age and never got to know him as an adult, so I often wonder if he'd be proud of the man that I am today. These two songs perfectly set you up for an album that is, by turns, dark and emotional, but also catchy in the way that only modern baseball can be catchy. And it's so relatable for anyone who has experienced a kind of loss. One of the things I really like about this album is that it's split in half between the two singers. Jake sings the first half, Brendan sings the second half, and they both take the lead respectively. It's like an emo version of the speaker box Love Below. It really succeeds in showing what the two can do and what they both bring to the table. Jake's half discusses loss, while Brendan's half discusses his own struggles that he was going through at the time. And the album ends on such a victorious and hopeful note.
It's all the same. It's time to confront this face to face. I'll be with you the whole way.
If this is the last album that Modern Baseball ever makes, then it's a hell of an album to go out on. It's got emotional depth, incredible musicianship, catchy hooks, and an abundance of heart. This is definitely an album for anyone who wants to get introspective about things like mortality and loss and depression. And if that sounds like something you're into, give Holy Ghost a try. By the time I graduated high school and I was entering college, I was getting more and more into emo music. In high school, I listened to bands like My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, and a lot of commercially successful pop, punk, and alternative bands with an emo flair. I was also getting into cooler bands like Jets to Brazil and Snowing, but college was really where I started to become a scholar in emo and its offshoots. One offshoot I was really into was math rock. Now, you might be thinking, Trevor, what's math rock? Math doesn't rock. And that's where you're wrong. Even if you don't know what math rock is, I'm sure you've heard at least one math rock song, especially if you use TikTok. I got into American football before they were a meme, so show some respect. At that point in time, the band and their signature song wasn't yet a meme within the music community. They were just a really good band with one really great album. And even when I was in high school, I knew it was an album that I needed to hear. But I didn't have streaming at that point. So I had to listen to it the old-fashioned way. And I didn't have money, so I couldn't buy the CD. But when I did finally manage to get my hands on a copy of that album, I listened to it on repeat. I bring up American football because they were my introduction to math rock. After I finally got tired of listening to American football, I wanted some new math rock bands to listen to. Enter Tiny Moving Parts. Tiny Moving Parts are an emo band from Minnesota, consisting of brothers William and Matthew Chevalier, I don't know how you say their names, and their cousin, Dylan Madison. A trio was something you really didn't see a lot of during the emo revival. It was always either the traditional four-piece punk band or these big giant collectives like The World Is a Beautiful Place. But Tiny Moving Parts found a fair amount of fame amongst these other bands. I listened to their album Pleasant Living a lot when I was in my second semester of college and I had just transferred schools. My commute was longer, so I had more time to listen to music. And this Tiny Moving Parts album was on constant rotation. I was very sad around the time this album came out. What was I sad about? I don't know. Did I even have anything to be sad about? I was a theater student with no job, no worries, no money, no bills. What the f*** were you so sad about, young Trev? You piece of shit. This was one of my go-to sad boy albums. I can remember driving home from class late at night and just getting existential to songs like I Hope Things Go the Way I Hope. And shouting along to a song like Sundress. And songs like Van Beers were so life-affirming at the time for me. Please stay strong. It might have been one of my sad boy albums, but it also made me feel hopeful, if that makes sense. Pleasant Living is definitely one of the most important albums of my college years. And I remember being really into Tiny Moving Parts for a hot minute. I still check them out today, but they've kind of faded out of my rotation. If you're looking to get into math rock or more intricate emo, Pleasant Living is a good place to start. And Tiny Moving Parts is a good gateway band. They're even still making music today, so you should check them out. The Front Bottoms are a folk punk duo from New Jersey who weren't exactly the biggest band of the emo revival. They did well, but they weren't like Modern Baseball or Tiger's Jaw. I think they found more recognition now with their song Twin Size Mattress going viral on TikTok.
This is for the Lions.
But I remember being really into this band, even as far back as high school when I heard songs like Rhode Island and 12 Feet Deep.
You are water 12 feet deep, and I am boots made of concrete.
They're a really interesting band. They were a duo who made music that sounded more like Say Anything, while their peers were making music that sounded like Mineral and American Football. And Brian Sella's voice is so unique. No one else really sounded like him at the time. This is for the lions living in the wiry, broke down frames of my friends' bodies. And I'm happy that their music is getting more attention now, even if it is on a cesspool like TikTok. The Front Bottoms signed to Fueled by Ramen in 2015 and released their third album, Back on Top. Signing to Fueled by Ramen felt like a big deal at the time. It was home to huge bands like Fall Out Boy and Paramore, and now this scrappy little pop-punk duo from New Jersey was a part of that legacy. I was excited. I thought they were going to be the next huge emo band to break out into like the mainstream. Now of course we all know that didn't happen, unfortunately. But Back on Top did leave a pretty big impression on me. This is my favorite album of all time. No joke. A lot of people expect my favorite album to be something by MCR or Panic, and for sure, some of their albums are in my top 10 and my top 5. But Back on Top by Front Bottoms is my desert island #1 all-time favorite album. No pauses, no skip, no cap. Back on Top is one of the rare emo revival albums that manages to be just pure fun. A lot of albums around this time leaned heavily into Midwest misery, but not Front Bottoms, oh no. This album has lyrics that are equal parts humorous and introspective. Songs like Cough It Out can be about smoking, but also unreciprocated love.
I cough it out, I cough it out, I cough it out, I cough it out.
And a song like Help can be about the end of a relationship where both parties don't want to admit it's over, even though the relationship is so toxic.
Help, you are the poison, I need help. What's up inside my body, help.
These were things I could relate to in my 20s. I listened to this album a lot to and from work and school. At the time, I worked a restaurant job that I absolutely hated, and I was just about to drop out of school. I was going through personal relationship problems at the time, and this album not only made me feel better, but helped me to feel like I wasn't alone in how I was feeling, and I wasn't the only person going through these emotions. And I would share this album with anyone who would let me. My friends, when they would tell me to bring records over to listen to, I would bring this album. I shared it with girls I was into at the time. It was a big part of my personality. It was my go-to album for any mood I was in. Happy, sad, frustrated, introspective. This was the album for me, and it still is. If you like emo or pop punk or folk punk that is fun but not devoid of meaning, then I recommend giving this album a listen. I've recommended this album to everyone I know, and now I'm recommending it to all of my subscribers. Check it out. What do you think about these albums? What do you think about these albums? What do you think about these albums? Do you like them as much as I do? Or do you not like them as much as I do? Let me know in the comments. That's gonna do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, I highly recommend giving that like button a nice little spank. Just a little one, not too much. And if you enjoyed this video, then maybe you have someone in your life who would enjoy this video too. So share it with them and with everyone you know. I'm a small, independent creator who does this all by himself, and liking, commenting, sharing, interacting with this video in any way really helps me out. And I'd also really like to give a big thank you to everyone who checked out my last video, who liked it, who left a comment. I really did not expect it to get as big as it did. That was insane. Like, I would wake up and it would have just like 100 views, 200 views, and it just kept going up. It's my most popular video now, and it's all thanks to you guys. So thank you for watching that video, and thank you for watching this video as well. As always, I'm Trevor. Stay uncool. And that's the end of the video. Goodbye. I don't even think this is tuned. Yup.